Welcome back, scholars. We hope you've had a great day so far. We know we're throwing a whole lot of information at you and putting you in situations where you're trying to get to know each other computer screen and trying to learn and hear from the Reagan Foundation and GE. So we hope that it's been productive and that you've enjoyed your time with us today. We have one more session for you today, and then we'll pick right back up tomorrow. So this session is going to be a little bit different in that it's going to be a little bit more interactive than our last two panel discussions. It will start as a panel discussion, and then we'll move into kind of a more interactive session, which I think should get your juices flowing and good way to end the day. So as you have already heard from a number of our existing scholars, we heard from a couple in our first session, and then we had some scholars moderate our last two panels. It really is our desire to bring back our scholars who are so important to us and such a big part of this our program to participate in this retreat and help communicate to you what this program is all about. So here to help me with that today is one of our 2015 scholars, Tim Land. I'm going to have him introduce himself in just a second and introduce the other panelists. But I want to say that Tim has been one of our biggest supporters. He's always very supportive of our efforts and always very engaged. Tim has been involved in a very interesting project that is going to be the focus of this discussion and workshop. And I think him and our panelists, who he'll introduce you to you in just a couple of seconds, they'll be able to share kind of a really unique perspective from your generation directly about how to lead, how to discover what type of leader you are, and how to lead wherever. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim. Tim, if you could introduce yourself and introduce the panelists, and you could take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Erin. And yes, like Erin said, my name is Tim Land, and I was a 2015 scholar. I'm just going to skip my intro. I apologize again. The delay was due to some technical issues on my end, but let's just jump right into the session. So the theme of today's here in a conflict-ridden and backsliding world. So today, learning and growing into democracy and freedom and fair belief in real and factual in the protection of human rights are deteriorating everywhere, whether in the US under Donald Trump, in China under the current CCP, in Brazil under Bolsonaro, and several other major political and economic powers. According to the Global Democracy Index, since 2015, democracy has been in steady decline around the world and significantly in decline in America. We are truly living in a world that is embodying the Ronald Reagan quote of freedom is never more than one extinction. However, despite that pessimistic introduction, this is today's global context of leadership. However, of course, leaders with great challenges come great opportunities, and a new generation of thoughtful, empathetic, inspired leaders are emerging to prepare and lead us against our world's greatest challenges, such as climate change, inequality and access to opportunities, of human rights at home and abroad, and the continued rise of major foreign economic powers with authoritarian regimes that threaten the values of freedom. And of course, this is not a comprehensive list. Of real impact are not, however, made overnight. They grow into these roles by first focusing on themselves and their core values and beliefs, and then they live out communities and on a slowly ever increasing, all encountering greater and greater personal and professional challenges along the way. Leadership is not easy, but it is needed, especially in America right now, in a desperate way. The Ronald Reagan Foundation, GE, and all of my fellow scholarship alumni know this, and we are all here as resources to help you grow and develop and hone these skills over the coming years. And I'm so incredibly honored to my fellow colleagues and incredible authors, Raina and Kathleen, on this call right now. Authors Raina Cataville and Kathleen Schwind recently published a book on the biographies of 40 young leaders in many different fields and are experts on what makes a successful emerging young leader. The book is called Ignite. Available for order. Raina is the creator of Ignite Your Story, and she's also the author of The Voice of Thunder, which she's currently working on the sequel, which I'm very, very excited to read. And she currently works with MasterCard, and she's also involved very actively with the United Nations and British Parliament. And then she's also joined by Kathleen Schwinn, who is also the co-author of Ignite Your Story. Currently doing many things, but especially researching water security in the Middle East and North Africa at Stanford University, and she was previously working on that at MIT, University of Cambridge. So we have two incredibly qualified panelists to talk about growing and emerging into a young leader. And so let's just jump right in to the Q&A. We're going to spend about a half an hour going back and forth asking questions, and then we're going to spend about the last 15 minutes doing more of an interactive session. I have a couple, I've read all of your bios, new GE-Reagan scholars, and so be prepared. I'm going to be calling on a couple of you, so gear up for that to get some special, consulting expertise directly from Raina and Kathleen. So Raina, let's start this fantastic panel with you. You've spent the past 2 years researching and documenting the traits of young leaders. At a high level, what have you discovered?
Yeah, really today, because at this moment in your lives where you're standing there as a leader, in high school, getting ready for college and receiving schools like this one, I still remember being in a spot, making friends with amazing people, amazing young people like Tim and Kathleen, and really just taking every chance to make an impact and getting ready to change the world. It's an incredible time in your life, and I hope you truly enjoy it. And one thing that, coming back to the question, I've maybe a bit unfortunately come to understand is leadership, not these days. We're seeing more and more young people take on that mantle and be supported by everyone from community members to politicians. And I think of it a bit as the Katniss Everdeen theory or syndrome. The best leaders, they don't go looking for leadership. The best leaders are people who notice a problem in their community or in the world and set out to use whatever skills they have and have developed to make an impact for the better, whether it's turning a few people's lives around or creating a larger structure. Young people are increasingly recognizing that investing our time and money and impact in making a world a better place is really worth it. And we're getting more and more creative with our solutions. And I think that's really exemplified. And the 40 scholars that we have in this book are really testament to that. And from reading your bios, I think each one of you are too. And we have these stories in this book of people who have cultivated worms as a sustainability solution, designed yard signs to spread smiles and positivity, started a jump rope program to help lonely students and cope with ADHD. And the methods that young people are dreaming up to make a difference are just so unique these days. And I also want to add that these solutions are always stronger with young people supporting young people, and when communities actually believe in young people and unite behind us. I think we all have the responsibility to hear and support each other's ideas to make this difference. And for some of us, that's about investing our time, money, connections. But for all of you scholars listening, I think that's a call to action to share your ideas with one another and figure out what skills you have to support one another and work together to make your solutions bigger and better.
Raina, I love that. New sort of theory of leadership that the desperate times call for new types of leaders. That was fantastic, and that leads perfectly into my next question for Kathleen. How do you feel like leadership is evolving among this group, this new and emerging group of young leaders? Different times call for different styles of leadership, and in writing this book, have you noticed any sort of macro trends and shifts in leadership as a concept?
Great question. First of all, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you to the Reagan Foundation for having myself and Raina here today. I grew up going to the Reagan Library in California, and so it's so exciting to be talking with all of you today. And again, congratulations. This is hugely exciting, and we can't wait to continue following you and seeing the amazing things that you do. To get back to the question that Tim asked, I think Raina made an excellent point by saying that the leaders that we have in these books all have very unique paths. And that's one of the reasons why we are so keen to capture their stories and share them with the world. I do find two main trends looking through all the stories that we've written so far. One of them is that every single person in our book has a unique and distinct passion that they are extremely passionate about and throw all of their weight behind. They found something that matters to them, and that they're going forward with it, whether it's something that's popular in their community, whether it's something that's not popular. And they were teased all through middle and high school because they were the only person who cared about the environment. No matter what kind of feedback they got, they pushed on because they were completely passionate about something that they cared about, whether it was something that was deeply personal to them, whether it was something that they saw as a need in the community and thought that's the passion project I want to take on. All of them are passionate about something and not afraid to go ahead and try to make that difference. I think the second main trend that we see, and one of that you all know very well, is that they focus on the community. They focus on an interconnectedness. They see an issue and they don't think, how can this be solved for me or my family? But they look beyond that. How can we get academics in the community involved? How can we get the youth involved in the community? They look at the problems as an entire community and at a community scale. And I think that's a similarity that you all have as GE-Reagan scholars, is that you're driven by a sense of civic commitment to engage in your communities. And that's another trend that Raina and I have seen throughout all of the scholars in our book.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathleen. Raina, I'll throw it back to you with what is going to be a very challenging question. So I gave a very pessimistic, introduction to what it means to be a leader in the context of the world right now. And I wanted to do that just because that's a real take on the world. We're emerging from, and still in, honestly, from a global pandemic and just so many things seeming to deteriorate around the world. And what have you found among these 40 leaders that you've studied that have had to grapple with this? All of us as young people are grappling with these challenges. And how did they overcome these sort of existential dark clouds of gloom seeming to hang over a lot of what we're having to deal with right now to have a positive impact and to continue to grow in their leadership journey?
So I think that's a really important one, honestly. I think oftentimes when it comes to high achieving game changer types, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding that they're always on the ball, that challenges like mental or physical health or resources or everything going on in the world or even just tiredness don't bring us down. And I think if there's one thing this book makes very clear, it's that that's not true at all. Everyone in this book has coped with trials, big and small. But the difference is that these successful leaders tend to use negative experiences and the negative things that they see in the world, which, like you said, there are plenty of them, but they use them as their motivation instead of their inhibitors. And when they see or experience something that upsets them, that they think is fundamentally wrong with the world, they get to work figuring out how they can change things so that that hurdle is a bit shorter and a bit easier for the rest of us. And most importantly, I think when things go wrong, they don't give up, they pivot. I think a really good example from our book is a story I co-authored called For Nishant, about a scholar who had to find ways to cope with the death of his brother and best friend from cancer. And reading the story, you'll see that his journey to reach a solution wasn't easy or quick by any means. But to quote from the book, with time and support, a determination that Nishant should be more than a memory broke my void. He went on to raise over $60,000 to fund pediatric cancer research and found an orphanage in a small town in India in honor of his brother's memory. And I think that's a great example of overcoming adversity, overcoming the circumstances that are set out by the world, and really making an impact with it and never giving up. And honestly, Tim, you're not wrong. The world can be pretty depressing right now, pretty upsetting. But that just means that it needs young leaders more than ever. And luckily for us, world leaders are more willing and able to listen to us than they ever have been before. Ignite Your Story has a lot of little tips and tricks spread across the stories for ways that our scholars have secured funding for their nonprofits or startups, pitched themselves for jobs and positions that may have seemed out of reach, or rallied a community around a cause, possibly a lesser known cause. And in my own experience, whether it was speaking at the UN General Assembly or my local election campaign or at a funding pitch for my nonprofit, if you have something thoughtful to say and you say it with the best interests of others, people will listen. you just have to figure out, I think of it like Kathleen was saying, you have to figure out which cloud of gloom you feel fired up to tackle, and you just have to go for it.
All great points. I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that one, because I think this specific question is something that I really wanted to bring out today. So Kathleen, maybe you can answer this first, and then Raina, you can answer after Kathleen. So Raina, you and then you also touched on earlier talking about, mental health and, the recharge time that's needed. So at a practical level, both you do this because you are young and emerging leaders as well as writing about them. What are your sort of daily practices as, negative information comes in the morning as you're catching up on, what's happening in the world? And then what is sort of the balance of, okay, I'm taking this, I'm identifying a problem in this area, whether it's education or water security or whatever it may be, and I'm, funneling that information into action, but then I'm also doing X, Y, and Z to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and not burning myself out. Because burnout for all of us is so prevalent, and it's something to really continuously manage. So does that question sort of make sense of balancing the negative things as inspiration, and then also, some specific technical practices that, that our new class of scholars can apply? So Kathleen, maybe you can take a stab at that first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an excellent and very important question, and very relevant to the work I do. Most of my research is in defense innovation and looking at a water scarcity and conflict in the Middle East. And there is more times than not very negative news about the Middle East and what's going on there than positive news. So every morning when I wake up, I read the news, I read the emails that my contacts have sent me across the Arab and Israeli world. And yeah, there's a lot of things that can get you very discouraged. But I think something that I was very fortunate to grow up with is this intense sense of optimism and looking at each issue and thinking, okay, the skills that I have, the networks that I have, how can I go and solve that? I remember hearing about, with the recent conflict in the Middle East, there was a small village whose water pipelines were completely bombed to bits. They could not get water at all. And I remember thinking, well, I know a local NGO in the area. I know some academics in the area. I know some research scientists in the area. I think I can pull these all together, and I think that I can make a change and get people excited about trying to solve this issue. And long story short, it worked. So I think, having that optimism, using the incredible networks that you have, and everyone here today has incredible networks and has built those up, because that's why, one of the reasons why you're scholars here. So I think that, looking at what are the potential solutions in every problem that you see is incredibly valuable. And also for me, it's having that sense of optimism of, anything can be solved if you just work hard enough and you have the right team behind you.
And I guess I can hop in next. So this brings me back to about 6th grade when I started running my very first nonprofit, which was Global Ambassadors. And as a 10-year-old, there was a lot going on in the world. I was really just starting to learn about it and figure out what it was. I wasn't thinking about it, all of these causes quite as critically as I am now. And it was a matter of figuring out, like I mentioned just now, which dark cloud I wanted to tackle. And the one that I landed on most dominantly ended up being actually similar to Kathleen, was water scarcity. And specific, I narrowed it down a bit more to water scarcity for young women in Kenya. And so what we ended up doing is raising funds to provide girls' schools in Kenya with freshwater facilities and also libraries down the line. And of course, there were positive and negatives that came with that. There were the positives of, reading letters from the girls that we helped and just being so inspired by what these young women face every day, and the challenges that are part of their day-to-day lives that we never even have to think about because of who we are and where we grew up. And on the side, there was, understanding that those challenges are by thousands of, and probably more than that, young people around the world every day, and really come to terms with how to educate other people about that once I had an understanding myself. And then tackled the cause. Though freshwater was our primary cause, we set about educating young people about the UN Sustainable Development Agenda in general. So we talked a lot about food scarcity, homelessness, and climate change, and really just everything. The water was our cause, and the solution was, as much as you talk about the sad parts, the gloom, you also talk about the people who are founding nonprofits, who are founding startups, who are going after these issues and actually tackling them to make it very clear that while there are clouds in the world, not all of them are dark and gloomy, there is sunshine in there. There are people actively tackling these problems, and that a lot of them are actually being fixed, whether it was by the United Nations or by grassroots organizations. We saw a lot of positivity, like curing polio, and really focused on those case studies in addition to the things we were actually actively trying to fix. And just to build on or move away from that point for a moment, in terms of your point on burnout, Tim, when I was at the age that a lot of you scholars are at, I was doing, in my mind, everything. I was running my nonprofit, to scholarships in college and this and that in class. I guess was all fun. And I, being young, didn't quite understand burnout just yet. And going through college, taking a lot more jobs and responsibilities and dealing with finances and all of that really brought into what burnout is. And so, especially during COVID, which has been absolutely devastating for the world, really, but I've been trying to find positives in it. So I've been trying to time into taking care of myself both mentally and physically. Like, whether it's a hair mask or a face mask while I'm jumping into a meeting that I don't have to be on Zoom for. On a call that I don't have to be on video for, or whether it's taking time to go back to reading and writing something that I had kind of put pause on during a lot of the craziness I dealt with during college. I think making time for that and a big part of what's prevented burnout for me. And then on the note of continuing what I want to do, really just organizing my life, trying to do book lists and making sure that I do things that are at the list, again, whether it's something that is a professional priority for work or for my nonprofit, or whether it's keeping in touch with people, people on this panel, and finding time for that face mask or that workout. That's been a big part of what I've learned to integrate that I didn't necessarily understand when I was at your age, and I hope we can all incorporate it sooner than I did. So yeah.
Excellent answers, both of you. I would just add one other thing, Raina. I liked what you mentioned there at the last minute about sort of breaking things into smaller. Mm-hmm. That's probably been the most helpful thing that I've started to do. And this wasn't probably until near the end of college, because similar to you, I have many different projects in different domains. And, right after I started college, I started to kind of get over it as my academic increased after, post high school. And so one of the things that I implemented that has helped deal with the overwhelmingness of sometimes all of the scope of and scale of projects that you take on is having everything very clearly mapped out, and then just only focusing on a small, very actionable, immediate next step, not having to worry as much about of it all, just the immediate next thing to do, and taking it, one step at a time. So we'll revisit that stuff in the Q&A session, because I see 10 scholars who all have, multiple nonprofits or, leadership across several organizations. And so I know that all of you listening are, could be, potentially struggling with this already, or it could be right on the horizon. And so we want to talk through that right off the bat. Okay, back to the question. So Kathleen, my next question is for you. You already sort of touched on it on your answer to your first question. Leadership emerges from passion. And how did these 40 leaders that you've written about convert their passion into action?
I think the most important thing is they believe that they could. Some of our scholars, come from backgrounds where they had all the resources to make things happen. Others came from hardly anything. They had no parental support, no funds, were staying up till 2 a.m. looking at how to start a nonprofit and what all the legal jargon meant. But they absolutely believed that they could, and they wanted to make that difference. I think that is the most important part. Just having believing in your idea, and then going forward with that. I think the second most important thing, and also a theme in our book, is finding and building the right team. Folks have mentioned that, the original Spark may have been their idea, but they had the most incredible team to help back them up. I'm thinking of a scholar who I co-authored for. His name is Tyler. He created something called the Hope Festival, which is an incredible festival that helps the homeless community and those who are struggling with homelessness. And he said that without the team, he would not have been able to reach the scale that he did and impact as many lives as he has. So I think, again, finding the right team is essential. And overall, it goes back to what Tim was just saying about, breaking things into manageable tasks. They also had an overall vision. They had a vision that they were able to communicate to others, to get other people on board. They're able to get people behind them and believe in their cause, because it's one thing to have one person with an idea that believes in themselves and believes that they can do it. And it's a completely different thing to have an entire community behind you to help make that idea a reality. And that's something that I have found is very important in my life, is having that overall vision and finding the right team. And that's, I think, the best way to convert passion into action, and something that we've seen with all of our scholars as well. Something else too is just a passion for learning. Even though they have their idea, they're able to actually make it a reality because they're constantly learning. They're constantly curious. They want to help, and they know that the way that they can help the best is by continually learning about the issue, learning about their team, learning how to be a better leader. So those are some of the key themes.
Fantastic, thank you. I want to ask a follow-up, Kathleen, to that as well, because one of the things that I think is really important, you talk about team, and I 100% agree with you. Another thing that I think is really important for growing leaders is the connection aspect, the connecting their work to, somebody else out there who's doing something similar, or some, funding body, whether it's, trying to find a grant or, some source of funds to scale the project that you're working on. And that's sort of interconnected, I see, with the team building aspect too. So what is sort of the first steps in that, or maybe not first steps, that's not the right word exactly, but sort of like at a technical level, the outreach and the finding these different, areas to either grow and build your team, or find, opportunities to serve, or find funding to scale. Does that sort of make sense what I'm asking? Like that at a technical level, that sort of outreach aspect. What are some tips and tricks that you would give our scholars?
That's a great point, because it's one thing to talk about it in theory. It's another thing to actually do it in practice when you're sitting at your dining room table and you know where you want to get, but you don't know how to get there. I think the most important thing is first, realizing or thinking like, why are you doing this? And being able to, in 30 seconds, the classic elevator pitch, be able to tell that to yourself and to other people. We were talking about burnout earlier. It's really important where, a couple years down the line, you hit a roadblock to go back to that original statement of why you're doing what you're doing. And that can help you engage people. Once you have that, once you have an idea, once you can explain your vision really well, run it by people who you trust the most and just talk about it and say, I have this idea. What do you think about it? Do you know anyone who could potentially help with this? You'd be surprised with how many either local communities, even international corporations have foundation arms or arms that are looking to give funding to young people making a difference in the community. I found that out, and I was shocked. I had absolutely no idea. And so I think that talking with people about your vision, again, developing your pitch, talking with the people you trust most to get feedback, and then going and just talking to people. I mean, that's the best way to find connections, because you never know whose dad is working on, this corporation, or someone happens to be the president of a foundation who gives away money for grants for things that you're doing exactly. So I think that's kind of the next step, is getting that word out. Not being afraid of getting no for an answer as well. If you're talking to people, some people might say, I don't know if that's a good idea, or you might ask for funding and they say no. Don't be afraid of that, because there's so many more doors. And if they do say no, say, well, what would it take to actually be able to get that funding or get that support, or what would it take for you to join my team? Because it's all a learning process. I think that's also key throughout your entire journey. See it as a learning process and learn and take notes and share that with other people, because that in itself is hugely important, and you can only get that experience by going through the steps. So to answer your question, Tim, in short, create your vision, practice your vision, put it into words, talk about it with the people you care about, and get feedback, and then go out and just talk with folks and see what connections you can make.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you. That was beautiful. I'm always going to be pushing for, I want technical details. I want the implementation plan for our scholars, how to apply all of this. All right, Raina, I'm going to come back to you for my last scripted question for you here. So today's world is filled with so much polarization. But leadership requires constantly working with people who might not believe exactly what you believe. And if we're being honest, young people are notoriously not the best at that character trait. So, but I'm sure the 40 leaders that you have studied have had to deal with this. So what can you share on your learnings of people and leaders learning to work across the aisle or in very nuanced multi-stakeholder situations? Well, feel free after Raina has gone.
Absolutely. So this is so true. And I think it actually connects back a little bit to the question you just asked off the bat. It can be really hard to work with people who have a different vision than you, especially the cause you're working on is very personal to you. You might have a set idea of what you think the solution is. But the truth with most problems in the world is that there are multiple paths to solve them, and there are different ways to solve them. And I think as you read through the book, you'll see that pretty much no one was able to actually reach success on their own. All our scholars have different skill sets and passions that they bring to the table, and it's a combination of it all that makes it a successful campaign or a successful solution. So to give a few examples, you'll see Grace, the founder of PEGS, turning to a Brazilian food scientist, and vegan influencers on Instagram to perfect her plant-based egg substitute. And you'll see Neha teaming up with other kids in her community when she was 9 years old to sell their toys and raise money to bring food and books and blankets to orphans in India. And that essentially laid the groundwork for what became her nonprofit, Empower Orphans. You'll see how Sean successfully pitched on Shark Tank, bringing back to that funding aspect to fund his company, and how Darren sent letters to all 130 college NFL teams to receive a training camp internship from just one, and how an absolute stranger helped Fatimata overcome a moment of racism and despair. And none of these people would be where they are doing what they are if they hadn't reached across the table, reached out, out there and see who was out there to help, to provide resources, and to actually work with them, hear their voice, and apply all of those to the solution, the goal that they're working toward. Lives of social networks is so much easier. With my nonprofit, we were looking for a CTO at one point, and all I had to do was post on Instagram and Facebook, and even from friends, and reaching out across Facebook to other universities, other groups, has made it easier to find talent from the people with passions, and really make those linkages. And I know that social media networks aren't the only place to find that. There, in addition to places like LinkedIn, there are so many organizations like Do Something, whose literal purpose is to be able to connect young people to causes that they care about and to connect them to one another when they're passionate about making a difference and building impact they're working to learn about. So that's just one example, but I know there are tons out there. And essentially my point coming back to it is that none of us can actually do it alone. I think to create a sustainable solution like a nonprofit, like so many of you are passionate about doing or have done, it means training and trusting others to fill important leadership roles, carry your mission to other parts of the world, or actually take over for you when you're moving on to the next stage in your life. You can't be CEO and CTO and CMO and all of it alone. You need to find people with those skills who are willing to work with you and hear their ideas, and be cognizant and excited, honestly, about the fact that they have skills that you may not have, that will bring your project to other levels, to new levels. And when it comes to those differing ideas, it's really important to open, respectful dialogue. Keep in mind that at the end of the day, what you want to see is the problem solved, all of you, and to see that project that you're working on be successful. But the good news is that, like I said, there are so many resources out there ready to support you in whatever you put your minds to. There are tools that make searching for a partner who has the skills you don't very easy, or to search for funding opportunities, publicity networks, or even just a mentor. And on that note, Ignite Your Story, we're hoping can be a little bit of a launch pad for that. We have 40 incredible people represented in this book who are doing what you are or what some of you hope to do. And if you resonate with one of these stories or see yourself in a scholar, you should definitely reach out to us, and we'll do our best to put you in touch with them and do what we can to kick off your work.
Yes, I would second that as well. I know, because I know most of the people that are written about in this book, and I can also want to be contacted by people like you who have a passion for growing their role in the world through service. All of us are going to want to speak with you. All right, Kathleen, I'm going to have the last question for you, and then we're going to transition into a more interactive phase here. So, Kathleen, I apologize because this is an incredibly difficult question to answer, but I think it's the most important question when it comes to leadership. Quality leaders have rock solid, unshakable core values. You talked about one of the things leadership is being able to say no, or failure, or having to constantly be iterating from one version of something to another, and that's built on these core values that ground everything that they do. So, but this process of defining what these core values are is notoriously difficult. So, what suggestions would you have to help these young leaders create a better framework for their values and where and how they fit into the world?
Tim, I'm so glad that you asked this question. And I love that one of the core values embodied in the GE-Reagan Scholars community is integrity and being rooted in principles, values, and ethics. So I think that this is incredibly important, like I said, and I'm so glad that you asked it. I think for all the scholars here, you've established yourselves as leaders and you've already been operating from a set of core values and beliefs, even if it doesn't feel like it. Those values are a part of who you are. They've grown over time based on, your family, the places you've been, the things you've worked on. They're part of who you are, and you have them now, even if you haven't identified them yet. And I think one of the most fun parts about being a leader is uncovering those values and seeing, what matters most to you and why, finding out what fuels you to do what you love to do. Some of you may know that, some of you may not. Sometimes people, they're in their 40s or 50s, and then that's when they find out why they actually love to do what they do. But if you want to go on that journey of trying to figure out what they are, because it is really helpful, because that can help you understand how you operate, how you lead, how you work in a team, etc. I think think about a couple of things. First of all is think about the times you felt most proud or most comfortable in certain situations or interactions along your leadership journey, and see if you can find a pattern from that. Maybe you didn't get a job, but you were really satisfied with how the experience turned out because you were honest about your qualifications. And in that case, honesty would be one of your key values. Maybe you remember being particularly uncomfortable in a meeting where one group wasn't represented by a stakeholder. And if that was the case, then inclusion of stakeholders and inclusion might be a core value that you hold really dear. So think about all the different experiences, the things that stick out in your mind, places where you're really proud, felt uncomfortable, situations where you're not really sure what you felt, and examine those and see if you can find a pattern, because often in our everyday interactions and how we interact with other people, that's where our values are. If you can't think of any things or any moments that particularly stick out, look at the people you admire most. Parents, family members, entrepreneurs, world leaders, researchers. Ronald Reagan's a great place to start. Think about why you admire them, and I bet you'll find some common characteristics that can help point to your values. One of the best pieces of advice that I got was, this is in terms of their career, but look at the people who are doing what you want to do and try to figure out what makes them successful in that job, and then try to, grow your skill set. And I think it's very similar when it comes to values. Look at those people who you just look at in awe and think, if I could only be them, or I hope I can be as successful as they are, or as good a person as they are. And then try to figure out, what makes them. If you have a chance, cold email them. You can talk with them if it's a family member or a friend. And then from there, try to figure out what drives them. And maybe some of your values you'll find align with that as well. So those are some practical things to start with. And also, don't overthink it either. Your values are part of you. And at one point or another in your leadership journey, they will surface and you will find out what they are. And it's an incredibly exciting journey. I know writing this book has helped me look at some of my key values. Some of the people I admire most in this book, we share values, and that's been really exciting to talk about. So it's an incredible journey. Don't stress over it. It's just a really, really fun journey along the way, and ultimately will help you become an even better leader than you are now.
Thanks, Kathleen. One other thing that I would add to that is I would encourage all of you to get a specific journal just for value iteration or the value. And one of the things that was really helpful for me when I was going through this process, because I think this is the number one thing too, if you haven't done this yet, or if you're still sort of like, oh, I'm not sure where this connects to this and how I fit into this. This is crucially important, I think, for young leaders to grapple with for themselves, is to, make it a graph, see, okay, it connects with this over here. These are the key values sort of listed out. And then each page should just be a new version of it. And it'll, constantly be, iterating, and it'll be changing, but eventually you'll come up with something really, really solid. So thank you. Thank you, Kathleen, for answering even as I pushed you for more and more technical details. So now let's open it up to these 10 incredible scholars. So scholars, we've read all of your bios. Edward, your work with Education Action for Native Americans is incredible. Pedro with the League of United Latin American Citizens. Reagan with the Future Farmers of America, 4-H. Bannon, or Banan, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, with the Healthcare Careers Program at FEMA. Kylie with 4-H and Aspire Livestock. Isaac with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. That was a group I was involved in as well, so love that. FCA and National Honor Society. Taryn with Mission Math, Utah. Brett with YMCA and the Boy Scouts. Chandler with 4-H and Science National Honor Society. And Alexis with Team HBV period and the Stanford Asian Liver Center. So we've all read your bios. So let panelists, and then I might press on a couple people. But let's see if there's any burning questions right off the bat here.
Don't be shy.
Okay, I see Brett popped up for a second. There's Brett. Hey, Brett, how's it going?
Good. How are you all doing?
Doing great.
So why did you all decide to write a book about leaders in their past?
That's an excellent question. Rita, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can kick off by just saying that I think you'll find something similar with this group of scholars as you. But one of the biggest things that came to the 2015 Coca-Cola Summit for me when I was first inaugurated as a Coke Scholar with Kathleen and Tim too, was just how shook I was by the incredible young people I was meeting. Not that my own community didn't have incredible young people, but I'd never or very rarely met young, literally starting a nonprofit or writing a book or doing whatever else it was that they were doing at this very high scale. And so staying in touch with them and building friendships with these people who could really relate to me in terms of many of the causes they were passionate about, or having this game changer mentality became a huge priority for me. And happy to say that I've stayed in touch with many of them. And some of them are some of my great story. A lot of the stories that you'll see, like Tim is in the book, for example, are people that we've kept in touch with over the years. And on the other hand, others are people that we heard from at various events, like the Coca-Cola host in various parts of the country over the years. And these are people that we've felt inspired by, who have inspired our work at various motivations. And we felt that, you know, the world deserved to hear that too. A lot of them have had challenges that they've had to overcome. And going back to to answer questions, I think people often think that people with that game changer mentality don't face the same challenges or aren't held back in the same way by these challenges just because they have overcome them. And I think it was very important to tell the story of people who have overcome these challenges and how they overcame them, so that others can be inspired, but also have the tools and the how-tos that they may want or may need in order to also make an impact in the world.
Yeah, Raina hit on most of the big points. Another one I would add is we were talking about optimism earlier and how there's so much negative news. And we turn on our news in the morning, we open up the paper either online or in print, and we see so much bad news and so many bad things happening in the world. And yet we had access to this incredible community of people solving those problems and making a change. And we thought these are stories that need to be shared outside of just the scholars community and need to be shared with the world, so that any person, whether they're young, whether they're old, whether they're come from a poor community, a rich community, whatever it is, we wanted them to be inspired and realize that they could make a difference too, and all that they needed was an idea and some passion, and they could make a difference. That was kind of the core principle behind the book itself. And we also wanted to be able to give some tips and tricks too, because again, not everyone has access to a group like the GE-Reagan Scholars or the Coca-Cola Scholars, but we hope that this book would kind of be a catalyst or a spark for other people to ignite their story.
And Brett, but one thing that I would leave you with here as encouragement from that is this book came from just one class, a scholarship class that, got together and, had some brain trust that was formed, and then this book came out of it. So your peers within both this GE-Reagan scholarship community and any other scholarship groups that you become a part of, staying in touch with them and focusing on that community aspect of it can just lead to some pretty incredible things. So thanks, Brett, for your question, and it was awesome to read your bio.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we have anybody else jumping in the moderation panel. I have a little moderation panel bubble on the bottom of my screen where I saw Brett pop into.
And also, I think happy to answer any questions you have about like the upcoming stage in your life, college and jobs and all of that. We've very recently gone through that. So whatever questions you have, even if they're not directly related to what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to just be, hey, let's get into the weeds on leadership stuff. Okay, awesome. Bannon, am I saying that?
I'm close. It's just like banana without the last A, so banan. But I wouldn't mind if you call me banana too. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Banan. Thanks for being willing to ask a question. What do you have for our panelists?
Yeah. So when I heard Ronald's point, that reminded me of a question. So here's the question. So what's something that you wish you would have done or would have known about as an 18-year-old that maybe you could pass along to us?
Yeah. Do you want to go first this time, Kathleen, or can you take it?
That is a great question. I think something that I wish that I knew, actually, I'll give you two very practical, one kind of a broader scope. One of them is that the problems that you're seeing in your own community are faced around the world. For me, that was specifically water. I grew up in California, never really thought that it could be an international issue. Again, I grew up in a very, very small town where everyone knew everyone. And I wish that I knew that, my passion for that could and would, expand even to an even bigger level, because now I focus, Middle East and North Africa, which is a very large region, expanding my research into South Africa as well as China. And so, understanding that these problems that you see in different parts of the world are most likely seen elsewhere. How you go about solving each one of those problems differs per region, but knowing that there are some trends, I think is something that I wish I knew. A more practical thing is that I wish I knew exactly how important knowing a foreign language was. I speak 2 languages, but knowing even more, I wish I'd started that sooner, especially in my line of work. So if you ever find yourself bored, go ahead and pick up another language.
A few things that I would say. One, going back to, again, one of my answers from the panel, self-care is so important. Make sure you get your, at least like 6 hours of sleep if you can manage it as often as you can in college. We really glamorize overworking ourselves a little bit too much. As important as, doing all this work that we have done is, it's also so important to take care of yourself, because if you're not functional and healthy, the work ends there. So take care of yourself, really get into a regiment with everything you want to do with yourself, whether it's working out, skin and hair care, all of that. Do the Googling, invest the time. I would say, honestly, for me, I wish I'd invested the money sooner too. And really make sure that you're taking care of yourself, also food-wise, eating healthy, and just figuring out what works best for you so that you feel as energetic and the best that you can, so that you can tackle more work down the line. So that's one big thing for me. Another big one that I did figure out pretty soon into college, but I like to tell everyone, is that when you're in college, especially at some of the universities that I see you guys going to, there are so many resources out there where they will literally pay for you to, whether it's learn a language, or for me, the big one was to travel. I figured this out a bit later in my college career, like sophomore year, but I went to Turkey, Beijing, Australia, where else? Is paid for because I tapped into the resources that my university was offering that honestly a lot of us didn't know about because they're not super well advertised. So if traveling is your thing, look into that. But if it's learning a language, learning code, dancing is another one that I took advantage of, taking dance classes in different styles. Take advantage of all of the opportunities that are out there that are not class. You're paying for them with your tuition, experience them. Or well-rounded person, or having traveled to all the countries that you want to have traveled to, and that'll obviously help to your resume. So it'll also benefit you in that when you apply to jobs your senior year, you'll be more competitive. And my last thing is just people don't take the word no too harshly. Even if you think that an internship or a job is out of your reach, just apply to it anyway. At the very least, you might make some connections with a hiring manager, or have a nice cover letter written for yourself for later down the line. But make that application and try and reach out to people in that network. I think you'll see that a number of people from our book have done that, and I know I've done it in my own experience. On paper, it may seem like you're not qualified compared to what they're asking for, but if you can pitch yourself well, if you can show them how your experience, it'll really pay off. So just go for it every time.
Awesome. Thank you both for those great answers. Let's see. I think since we're the last program of the day here, I think let's take one more question. How about Aaron, and then I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you.
So.
And I want to quickly point out, too, that I'm from the Middle East and speak Arabic, by the way, Kathleen.
That's incredible. I'm actually learning Arabic right now. I just learned the entire alphabet. So, well, I'm getting there.
Yeah, I'd be happy to connect later, too, and teach you. I speak it fluently at home. So, I mean, wow. I'd be happy to teach someone.
That's awesome.
We'll have to connect.
Okay.
Thanks, Banan.
That's awesome. Thanks, Banan. All right, up for one last question from the newest class.
Any other questions, or anyone want to raise something that or want to share a passion project of your own? Feel free to jump in here.
Okay. Oh, we've got Brett again. Hey, Brett.
So one one of the passion projects I've been working on is in order to up my skill sets within the digital media realm, I have been taking a photo or making a video every single day. That was my New Year's resolution. And so then to keep myself accountable, I post on Instagram. And so part of it, when I'm taking my photographs or making my videos, I'm thinking about this could be the best photo that someone may have of themselves at the current time. Or this company, for example, here in Kentucky, we have a little village called the Shaker Village. And so it's where a lot of the Shakers used to live here in Kentucky. And so they use some of my photographs for advertisements. And so that's just a little project I'm working on. And so it's on Instagram at 365Brett.
I need to look that up because that is also my resolution, or one of them. I work in marketing at MasterCard for context, and so, but I did not major in marketing. So elevating my marketing skills is something that I'm always looking for, especially in graphic design and photo editing. So I will need to follow you for motivation because I do skip days occasionally. So you're gonna keep me honest. But I think that's amazing, and really, like I was saying before, when you get to college, take advantage of one. My university at least gave us InDesign and an entire Adobe suite essentially for free, and that's how I learned InDesign and Photoshop and all of those. I probably wouldn't have paid for them when I was in college. So find the programs that they give you for free. I'm sure there's more than just Adobe, to be honest. And then also, yeah, there are graphic design classes you can take. I wish I'd realized I liked marketing sooner. I would have taken those classes, but yeah, really take advantage of all the photography classes, graphic design, whatever it is you want to do. They'll really get you good at movie editing. And then also, I mean, a couple of my friends who are much better than me at photography spent a lot of time just doing photo shoots for clubs and things like that. And after they did a few, they started getting paid for it. So that's a great way to actually, make a few extra bucks in college too, if you're going to stick with it. So best of luck, and love to hear that. That's honestly an inspiration to me.
Brett, that's awesome, and I love how you were talking about you're bringing the community together too by sharing your photographs. So that's fantastic. Keep sharing that with other people, because like Raina said, I think you've inspired a bunch of people now to start it. So thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, with that, first of all, I want to thank Raina and Kathleen, both of you, for your incredible answers and for taking the time to join our GE-Reagan, small community, provide your wisdom. And once again, the name of the book is Ignite Your Story, and would encourage everyone to check that out. To the 10 newest GE-Reagan scholars, I'm so excited to call you my family now. Welcome to the family. And congratulations to all of you, both for joining this incredible family and upcoming college adventures. See, we have three of my soon-to-be fellow Stanford alumni as well. So congratulations! I love the Stanford representing there, and to all the rest of you as well. Best of luck, and me and all of the other GE current alumni, GE-Reagan Scholarship alumni, I don't know, Aaron, what's our proper title, are always here to help in your next 4 years and beyond. So with that, I'll pass it back to Aaron, and thank you all for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Tim. Well, great job. Wonderful job moderating this panel. And thank you for bringing these two amazing authors to our attention. Raina, Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing. Scholars, I hope this was encouraging to you. I know it was. They are just a few years older than you, and think about all that they're accomplishing, and they're authors and they're doing wonderful things. So ladies, thank you for sharing with us. Tim, thank you for monitoring. I really appreciate this session and glad we could include it. So just a couple of housekeeping things. We are done for the day. I know it's been a lot of time on screen, so hopefully get outside if it's not storming in your area like it is by Brett. But take a little break, and then we'll see you back here tomorrow. We are back here on Hopin for sessions 5, 6, and 7. So you'll do just what you did today. Join Hopin, go to session 5 to get started. We're going to talk a little bit about your award. Then we're going to have our virtual pizza party. So check your email if you haven't done so already to get your Domino's gift card. We realized that maybe not everybody is near a Domino's, but we did our best trying to pick something that was kind of prevalent out there. So hopefully you can take advantage of that and have some lunch, whether it be a really early lunch if you're on the West Coast or a late lunch on the East Coast. You can see our desire is just to gather together and have a casual conversation. We'll do a little mix and mingle, and I'm hoping that we can continue the conversation from today. You all shared a lot of your passion projects when you filled out your survey, and this session just sort of flew by, so we didn't get to dive into them too much, but hopefully you can share some of your projects with one another, and I bet you're going to find a lot of commonalities. So we'll be doing that tomorrow, and then we'll hear from some of our other scholars about life on campus and beyond. So just to continue to prepare you to head off to college and continue to lead and serve in college and afterwards. And then finally, at the end of tomorrow, we will have our awards presentation. That is the only portion will be done off of Hopin. That's a Zoom webinar. The link was sent separately in your program. So go ahead and register for that event. It'll be a Zoom webinar. We will pull you up onto the screen to have a family member pin you with the pin that we sent in your package. So make sure you have at least one family member or friend with you. I know some of you are traveling, so do your best there. But certainly the whole family is welcome. So if you have the whole family gathered around, even better. We would love that. We want to celebrate you and share your achievements. So everyone is welcome, and you can even share the link with others. Your nominators have been invited, but if you want to send it to grandma, grandpa, cousin, whatever, feel free to do that. We would love to have them join us. So that's about it for tomorrow. For tomorrow's attire, you're wearing your in your package if you have that handy. And then for the awards presentation, it's just business attire. If you have not joined our Facebook group yet or our LinkedIn group yet, if you have access to those platforms, go ahead and do that. You can friend me and I can add you to those. And feel free to be posting about our virtual scholars retreat. I know it's not the same as seeing our grounds and our museum in person, but certainly feel free to post about your adventures, and you can use the hashtag GE-Reagan. So with that, I'm going to feel free to reach me separately if you have any questions or concerns. Otherwise, we will see you back here at Hopin tomorrow afternoon Eastern Time, morning Pacific Time. All righty. Take care, everybody.